How do we clearly hear God? But of course it relates to what we just talked about. Now I want to frame it around, and I want to contrast what I'm going to call a worldly discipleship to Jesus discipleship. Because unless we're clear on this, our hearing isn't going to be clear. So the world's discipleship is, be popular. Jesus says, reject popularity, be popular with me. So the same struggle, we've talked about this a little bit already, that the disciples had. If you remember when Jesus began talking about the cross, I'm going to go to the cross and get crucified, and Peter says, never, Lord, this will never happen to you. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Because Peter's very popular. He gets half the gospel. He's into Jesus, just not the suffering Christ, not the crucified Christ. The way we approach discipleship is we follow the crucified Jesus. And so our goal is not popularity. Our goal is Jesus. And so therefore, we follow Jesus into the crucifixion, wanting to be popular with him and him alone. And so Jesus invites us and calls us to a discipleship not to showiness. Jesus did not advance his life by doing miracles on demand. Think of the loaves and fishes. He did it almost invisibly. People don't know how did it even happen. He came to earth in great modesty, non-showiness. The Pharisees and Sadducees were very unimpressed with Jesus. They wanted a sign. What will people think of me? And it's interesting we talk about the politics here. It's such a struggle to be leading and not fall into the trap of how am I coming off right now? Whether it's a sermon, whether it's a political statement, where I'm so concerned about what other people think. The craving for honor or the craving to impress people is very subtle. If we're going to clearly hear God, we have to become very self-aware that temptation to be popular with people, even in the, quote, Christian world, versus we reject popularity of people because we follow the crucified Jesus, has to be established. Okay, so be popular with him. Second is we also then reject the world's discipleship, which is trying to be somebody great. And Peter was consumed, the apostle, with being the great leader of the church and being sensational, and he had big plans. Satan inspired him to us, and Jesus just rejected greatness categorically. He wasn't great. And I think one of the most impressive things about Jesus was how the unimpressive really impressed him. It was the little people the world didn't count that he really was impressed by, widows and orphans. And then, of course, we reject success by the world's standards, and we embrace Jesus. So the whole world religion of being a success we reject. And then, of course, avoiding suffering and failure, which is the world we live in, the world's discipleship. I just see so much of discipleship wrapped into, I got to call it's an Americanized Jesus. And so we're avoiding pain, we're looking to be popular, looking to be successful, looking to be great by the world standards, and have Jesus wrapped up in it all. And so the invitation of Jesus, we're here we are, we're leaders. How do I hear God? My mission, my goal in life is to follow him who was crucified and risen. And so I may have many sub-goals in my life, and you may as well, but my number one goal is that he might say, really, at the end of my life, foolish as it may look, and whether people like me depending on where I am in history, what country of the world I'm in, the unique calling I may have in my life is how popular or unpopular I'll be by human standards. It's all secondary. But my number one goal is I want to please Jesus regardless of what the consequences might be. So how do I do that and hearing God? I have three, and actually, as I've reflected on my life of over 4 decades, and I think an invitation, I have 3 practices or 3 words that to me sum up that deeply transforms, that follows the crucified Jesus entails. And I'll just use these 3 words. I believe they're in your notes. And the first is that we're going to hear God clearly with all these voices, we've got to first relax in Jesus. And I take that word relax from, in John, the Gospel of John, 98 times is used this word, to be believing in Jesus or trusting in Jesus. And I like what one great commentator said about the best modern translation for the word to be believing, present tense, or trusting in Jesus, is to be relaxing in him, to be letting ourselves be held by him. And so that of all the anxieties going on out there in the world, it's interesting how this really dovetails what we've spoken about before, whether it's political or racial or pandemic or wars, that we are doing the work watching our bodies, etc. And I'm not striving and frantic to hold things together because he somehow is. And the great illustration of this, and it's actually in the same passage where Jesus says, they ask Jesus, what are the works that we must do that God requires? And Jesus says, there's only one work, and that is to be trusting or believing or relaxing in the one in whom we believe. That's the one work that we're called to do. And at that time, thousands are leaving Jesus. And Jesus just is very relaxed in the Father's love. And he says, all those the Father has given me will come to me, even though thousands are actually leaving him at that point. He's only got the 12, and one of them is Judas. But he's relaxed. And he doesn't get uptight like his siblings who wanted to go to Jerusalem, make a name for himself in chapter 7 of John. He just stays. He's trusting the Father's got a handle on the mission. The Father's got a big picture here. It's going to be okay, and he relaxes in the Father's love. So that's number one. If we're going to hear God clearly, we've got to, daily, this practice of relaxing in the Father. The second is that we detach for Jesus. By detachment, I'm not talking about the cold, analytical detachment of a CPA accountant doing your taxes or a judge making maybe a judgment about your traffic ticket. I'm talking about not clinging or resisting what's happening around us in a sense of not in an unhealthy passivity. I'm talking about we have actually surrendered our lives willingly, trusting the goodness of the Father. We're not willful. There's two great postures in life. It's willfulness. And interesting, as we talk about politics, we talk about how we lead, is I lead in a sense, almost a detached activism. I've got some directions of goals, but I'm always holding it lightly. I'm not holding on to anything but Jesus. I love our church, but I hold it lightly. I love our country. I hold it lightly. I love my family. I hold it lightly. I'm not clinging or attaching. I don't have to have something. I'm allowing life to happen as God in his sovereignty is unfolding it. I'm bringing my leadership to bear, but not in this aggressive, striving, attachment sense. And I like what Meister Eckhart said. Unless we're emptied of all the stuff we're holding on to, God can't fill us. And God only fills empty vessels. And so as I'm going to hear God, I've got to have this posture of just this letting go-ness, of surrender and willingness floating down the river, willing versus I'm going to swim and make this thing happen. So this thing of detachment has been for me over the years, especially the last few years, a very key word of surrender and willingness, not willfulness and grabbing. And lastly, the last word is the word listen. And it comes out of that great passage. And so that's for me is just, when I do morning, midday offices and prayer, silence, solitude, everything, scripture, I'm seeking to relax in him, and I am seeking to let go. Praying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I'm just letting go of my agenda and what I think is the right thing to do and praying for his to come. And the last word I have is listen to Jesus. So I'm relaxing, I'm seeking to detach, and I am listening. It comes out of Matthew 17 when Jesus comes into Mount of Transfiguration and great things are happening, and Peter immediately has a plan to build 3 booths. He gets nervous, and he rushes to make it happen. And Jesus interrupts him. And then the Father speaks from heaven and says to Peter and the disciples, listen to him. And again, Jesus is leading them to the crucifixion, they like glory, just like I like worldly success and worldly popularity and worldly not suffering and failure and worldly greatness. And Jesus is taking me another direction. And so it's, listen, so the most important thing you do, the most important thing I do, listen to Jesus in whatever he wants to go, out of a place of detachment, a place of relaxing. That is the most important work that you and I can do. Is my life is one of listening. I'm following a person. He's going somewhere. I really don't know where to go. I think I know where he's going, but I don't. And so I'm always kind of with this posture of hands open. And I don't, the temptation for me, and I lived this way for years, is I want a spiritual life, but I want to be in charge of it. While really the spirit, and so I've got all these plans and ideas of how it should unfold. But listening to Jesus is more important than any plan, any project, any program in the world. And so I'm talking about a deep, deep listening where there's time and space actually come in. So how do I hear God amidst the multitude of voices? My broad strokes, and these folks will fill it out in just a minute, is to relax. I love that word, relax in him. Detach from worldliness, from everything worldly in the world, and then I listen. I want to be listening and to him. And you can expect, and just like I expect, he's taking me in direction and taking me to places and be with people I never even imagined I would be. And life is one big surprise when we listen to Jesus and follow him.